about that, everybody. Technical difficulty there right quick. But yes, it is your girl, Marcy Thomas, and I am so excited to be here with you again for another episode of the BGC Book Club. So come on in the room, everyone, as we get started and get ready to dive into a really wonderful conversation with a guest that's been here before and will continue to come back just because I love her work. I love the things that she writes about, her process. Everything I love about our featured author for the evening. So thank you once again for joining us. If you watched me last Wednesday, I wasn't in my normal space. I'm back in my normal space today. So I'm excited about that and just really ready to dive into a wonderful conversation. So if you haven't been here before, I'm Marcy Thomas, founder of the BGC Book Club, founder of Brown Girl Collective, and just a space that I really love to celebrate Black women writers and just Black women in general. So welcome. So tonight, our special guest is here to talk about her book, which actually isn't available until tomorrow, where you can actually get a real copy. But of course, I got one in advance. And that is The Trial of Mrs. Rhinelander by Denny S. Bryce. Now, she is the award-winning author of historical fiction novels, including Wild Women and the Blues, and In the Face of the Sun. She's a former professional dancer and public relations professional. She is now an adjunct professor in the MFA program at Drexel University, a book critic for NPR, and a freelance writer. And originally from Chi-Town, she now lives in Savannah, Georgia, which is an area I know well because I used to live in that same area. So without any further delay, let's welcome Denny S. Bryce to the BGC Book Club. Welcome.
Hello. I am, as always, thrilled to be here. I am looking forward to this conversation. Tomorrow's a big day. The book is out. So I was like, this is the way to kick off a book launch, having a chance to talk to you and the folks here at Brown Girl Collective. It's, good. It's very
good. And I'm so excited. And I consider it an honor that you would want to be here on, Book Pub Day Eve.
Yes, definitely. I'm glad to be here. Most definitely.
Yes. So, congratulations on a wonderful book that's based on a real life story. So we're going to, dive into that here in just a moment. But before we start getting into what the book is about, how do you feel about putting yet another great historical fiction work out into the world?
I am excited. I am nervous. I am excited again. This is my 6th book in 4 years.
Ooh, yes.
So I've been writing quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, because I'm also working on another book now, I feel like I'm slow, but I'm not really. I was talking about my process earlier, and one of the things, this book was initially mentioned to me in 2000, the story was mentioned to me in 2019 by my then editor at Kensington Books. And it ended up in my pitch for my second contract with them. And I started working on it like I do with all of my historicals. My research begins in fits and starts. I'd like to say, if I'm working on one book and I'm like, oh, let me just have a research hour. Mm-hmm. And I have tools like apps like Aeon Timeline and Scribner, and I am able to drop bits of history, creating what I call my guide post or those lamp posts or whatever post that are in the ground so that I know certain landmark events in history.
Right.
So I really started working on this book in 2019.
Oh, wow.
Not consistently because I had other things to do.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So when its turn came up to bat, like it was time to write it, I'd assembled quite a bit of information. It's definitely one of the most challenging books.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So for those who came a little later, this is the cover, and you may have seen it in the introductory or the promotional thing. So it's the Trial of Mrs. Rhinelander, which will be out tomorrow.
Yay.
Oh yes, I'm so excited about that. But you said that it was a challenge for you. What made this book perhaps a little more challenging than some of the other things that you've already put out?
There was so much information available.
Okay.
Scary thought that, because usually I'm like digging and digging and trying to find facts. There were actual transcripts from the trial
Mhm.
itself, because just preface, the trial of Mrs. Rhinelander is the story of a wealthy real estate tycoon in 1920s New York City. His name was Leonard Kip Rhinelander. His family was the Rhinelander family. I think one of the nicknames for his father might have been Prince or
Oh,
Major.
wow.
So they were part of the New York City elite, creme
Mhm.
de la creme elite. Every son, Kennedys, they hung out with the Kennedys, they hung out with the Rockefellers and all of
Mhm.
this sort of stuff. So this young man definitely was a part of that group. Well, he was also had some supposedly emotional problems,
Mhm.
that he ended up in a school outside of New York. And there are some conflicting stories about where and when the two the main characters met. I
Mhm.
chose the school, but she, Alice Beatrice Jones, was a domestic.
Yes.
She worked in the big houses in New Rochelle. Her family was not upper echelon rich by any means, but they did own a small house
Mhm.
where they might have taken tenants. The father had a taxi company that actually grew to have, I
Mhm.
think he had as many as 6 cabs at one point in time. And this is in the 1920s,
Right.
1930s, because the trial or the case, the thing that happened in court, the court case went on for a while. So,
Mhm.
so the premise of the story is, it's a bit of Romeo and Juliet in a
Yeah,
way.
it is.
Yeah, because you have these people who fall in love, and the families, um, especially his family, have a problem with it.
Mhm.
She's not the kind of girl that they thought, or the father, the family believed he should be with.
Right.
And then at some point in time, the news media, even though this family, they were British immigrants,
Yes.
mother and father had come from England to
Yeah.
America, turn of the century, maybe a little bit before, turn of the other century. We're going all the
Right.
way back
Yeah,
to
that's true. We had another one since then.
centuries right here. And they were hardworking. They blended into their community. Their
Mhm.
community was primarily a white community
Mhm.
because the mother was a British woman, a white British woman. The father was probably of Jamaican or mulatto descent,
Mhm.
a generation or two removed. But in England, it was a different attitude towards that,
Right.
being a few generations removed from colored, um, to America, where you had something that called the one drop rule.
Right.
And so um, here's a couple whose biggest problem that they thought they had to deal with was the fact that she came from a poor family.
Mhm.
The problem evolved into the fact that she hid her race from her husband. And that is the kickoff to the judgment, if you will, in the case, because the husband sued for annulment.
Mm-hmm.
But it's much more complicated than
It's
that.
much more complicated than that. And I didn't tell you this as we were preparing to come on, because we were getting all our technical stuff right.
Right,
But I like devoured this book like in a day. Not, admittedly, I do that a lot, but it was one of the ones that I was just like,
Oh, I'm so glad you enjoyed it.
really, because it's like, is this what I think it's going to be? Because one thing, well, you just said a few moments ago that there was a lot of information to find.
Yeah.
And I know that oftentimes when you're doing historical fiction, you may not have a lot to go off of.
Especially when it comes to people of color and the Black
Right.
community in particular, because documentation of just wasn't there.
Mhm.
And it gets better in the 20th century, of course,
Right.
versus some of the things I've researched in the 19th century during the Victorian era. But honestly, when it came to African Americans in this country, post 20th, early 20th century, you just don't get the female story.
Right. Right.
You get there's definitely books written about the male point of view. Historical figures is what I'm
Right.
referring to. Their story, but then again, their story is more lined up in terms of what they did
Right.
and not so much who they were.
Right.
And you see so many memoirs written about certain people and just endless documentation of this, that, and the other about their lives, where they were born, their parents' names, blah, blah, blah. And I haven't always found that when I'm doing biographical historical fiction. Another book I worked on, just to go in a different story for a few moments, is the Ella Maryland story I co-wrote with Eliza Knight, Can't We Be Friends? And the thing about Ella's, there's up until recently, and I just got a copy of the book that a historian had written about Ella's life
Mm-hmm.
2 months after I handed in the book.
Right.
But before that, digging for facts even about Ella Fitzgerald, you had endless facts about her albums, her travels to sing, etc., etc. But when it came to her personal life, there wasn't that much out there. And then Ella wasn't one to talk about her personal life. She was very private. So as I guess I'm really saying is that the challenge with the Rhinelander book was really going through all of these facts, this information. Another area that really surprised me was the number of dissertations and theses written by PhD students, et cetera, analyzing this moment in time.
Wow.
Because of how it really captivated the nation in terms of a news story. It was everywhere, front page news, every day of the trial. There are scenes in the book where I felt like I was really just a TMZ reporter back in the 1920s, because reporters would hide in their bushes, trying to get trying to get a glimpse of whatever.
Sounds like today in that regard.
It was crazy.
In that regard. But yeah, it's something. And I love the way that you formulated the story, because you're right. You could go, and if you found out about this story, you could go, and there are some books and, things that have been written, but it is just the facts. It's what happened in the trial, whatever, all those things. Those things would not have spoken to the inner life of Alice Jones. And I mean, it's kind of the same you said about Ella Fitzgerald. There are so many things that talk about what we do, but it doesn't dive into who we are or what we may be dealing with. So I love the fact that you found it in your spirit to go ahead and write this story so that we could kind of see the internal life of this person.
Absolutely. And then of course some of that internal life, I don't want to go into detail because spoilers.
Right, yeah, we don't do spoilers here if y'all looking for it, just so you know.
There were a couple of moments in the history and in the trial and in the letters she wrote that just gave me a strong sense of Alice Jones.
Mhm.
And the as we know, this is historical fiction, but the I wrote the book with a dual timeline,
Yeah.
and her niece was the other timeline. There's not a lot of information about her niece. I'm going to admit that, but that
Mhm.
is her niece was that age in the 1940s,
Okay.
and they were close for a period of time when she was younger until there was some additional things happened with the family. The
Mhm.
family was an interesting ups and downs and ins and outs and choices made by her two sisters were
Mhm.
so interesting. And that was another, as I said, it was a challenging book because there was so much information that
Mhm.
I had to almost say, I don't want to write a series of essays.
Right,
Write
right.
biographical fiction. I want to put character and heart on the page.
Mhm.
So that is for a change. I had too much
Right,
to
right.
work.
That's the thing, I'm narrowing it down because the book is 300 and I think
30,
15 pages or something like that
yeah,
without, author's notes and other things like that. So
right,
just to
right.
take that amount of information and narrow it down. But I want to dive into a couple of the things that we've already kind of touched on, but that I just found interesting. Now, and your fellow authoress, Rhonda McKnight, is saying hi.
Hi. She has a fabulous book, Bitter and Sweet.
Yes, yes, she was here
Yes,
a few
yes.
weeks ago. So yes. So hey,
Right, right. Hi, Ron.
yeah, I got authoress from Girlfriends. Maya Wilkes was the authoress.
Yeah, right, right.
So, but you touched on something because her family, a few things. Her family was an immigrant family that
Hmm.
came to the United States from England. And that was one of the things that immediately stood out to me because they came here, and of course, being white, they were able to be, a part of the community and things like that. But it also spoke to the fact of the whole thing of class, because here they are servants, they are, housekeepers, and doing those types of things as new people here to the United States. And so, we know about what was happening with, Black people or people of color, but just to see that, yes, there are people who may have come here initially, they weren't necessarily accepted because of class, not so much because of race.
Exactly, because they had property, they owned property, very unusual or didn't happen that at all with many Blacks. There were definitely different financial categories of Blacks in New York during that time,
Mhm.
but um, the numbers between those who were living on the block with W.E.B. Du Bois
Mhm.
versus everybody else who were, there was a discrepancy of huge proportions. So
Mhm.
this family also, they attended an all-white church,
Right.
and there was not a problem um,
Mhm.
in terms of them showing up. Um, Again, you're talking about this book takes me back into all of the decisions that
Mhm.
I had to make to get a story on the page with respect to what stayed in, what stayed out, but how to take that information in and make choices for character. What kind of woman was she? And what did she do, Alice Jones? What did she do at a certain point in time when things may have just slowed down in her life or changed dramatically? I think we have. I don't know if I'm still um
There was a little pause for the cause, so thank you, everybody. There was a little glitch, but keep
Okay.
going. Thank you.
Okay. No, I was just going on about, again, that all that information I was going through and looking for her character, what I felt, what kind of woman I felt she was. And I think I'm very pleased with the woman that I felt I found in her facts, in her
Yeah.
story as I read through them,
Yeah.
because I really supported her decisions, and I felt some sort of, I guess, camaraderie on some level to her her love. She was so in love.
She was
And
in love. My girl.
right, right. It was love. It was a love story. So it's one of those books that I'm very excited I wrote, but boy, there was some tough edits and
Yeah.
some long writing days.
I can imagine. Rhonda has another comment. I enjoy learning about the writer's process with respect to the artistic choices you make when writing about real people. Absolutely, because there are choices that you have to make, especially if there are situations where there may be family members that are still alive and legacy and what they're going to think and all that sort of thing. And I don't
I'll
think
tell you something about what you just said. I don't, when I'm writing about of real actual events, real people, I don't really check with family. Um, the There's some Rhinelanders out there, I'm sure, but I'm writing historical fiction, so
right.
as long as I'm not disparaging and the facts are the facts and supported by news articles and testimony, I felt comfortable um, writing what I wrote. It was funny though, recently I attended an event called a Polycon, which is an author event that is fabulous. It happens annually, usually in the Maryland, DC area, and it's put together by Jennifer Armitrott. But when I was there this past spring, a woman comes up to me and says, "I'm a Rhinelander."
Oh, wow.
I was like, "Well, great."
Yes.
I'm a little removed, but. So we had a great conversation, and just a little chat about, but her husband was the Rhinelander, but
Mhm.
I don't think she definitely wasn't connected to the New York, 1920s 400, but still there was some lineage there, and it was just fun.
Right, right.
We took photos,
Pretty neat.
did stuff like that. Yeah.
One of the other things that, we've kind of touched on, of course, there's a whole thing of class, and then there's a thing of race.
Yes.
And, this isn't really giving anything away because it's in, the descriptor of the book. You say Alice is white, and that there were choices that were made
Yeah.
along the way to live in a certain way. And I think some of it was that, and some of it may have been the fact that they initially were in another country, in England, which you've already kind of touched on, that ideas about race and interracial marriages and things like that may have been a little bit different than what we were dealing with here in the United States.
Absolutely, but also some similarities to some things that happen even today. Her mother, Alice's mother, Elizabeth, it's funny, the couple is Elizabeth and George Jones. My grandparents were Elizabeth and George Joseph.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, okay. But Elizabeth was white. As I mentioned before, George was the question mark. He was from Jamaica, but in Britain at that time, they had different categories for Negroes, coloreds, mulattoes, and different stature for those different groups. And the one drop rule, there's still racism in Britain now. Let me not
Right. Yeah.
try to pretend that
Clear.
let's be clear. But the one drop rule was not I don't even think it existed the way it did in America during that time period. Because one drop meant you weren't a part of the white world. That's why there was this big thing with passing during that time period. But there was also fear among the elite that someone would slide in and not be pure.
Right.
So one thing that I noticed as I was doing my research, and I guess it wasn't always clear to me, but it should have been, that during that time period, a lot of the wealthy in the world or in America were marrying first and second cousins.
Yes, to keep the line pure.
There you go. And there was always the Spanish girl that could infiltrate the, and she might be passing, et cetera, et cetera. It was so ridiculous. I mean, there was that, it's the fear of being somehow associated with people of color was just so ridiculous. It was fear. It was a fear that they wouldn't be their pure white selves.
Right.
Money. So
like Rhonda says, keep the line pure and keep the money in the family. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because I didn't realize that like Eleanor Roosevelt, was married to her cousin, things like that. So yeah, I mean, it's
I ain't saying that. Right.
So things like that. So, but in this story, Alice and Leonard or Lenny, Kip,
Well, I called it Lenny because I found, now this is a choice I made as an author. I thought Lenny made him more attractive than Kip. And I just thought Lenny was cuter. And that's how she saw him, was Lenny, not Kip. Kip was his mother's maiden name, last name, Kip something or other.
Gotcha.
And so it was too New York.
It sounds like somebody who's out on the golf course, His friends were like, come on, Kip.
and he, from what I read about him and how I envisioned him, he wasn't Kip.
Right.
He was a nice guy. They met when he was 18.
Right. And she was a little older. So there was that as well, that they met and over time began to develop this friendship that ultimately, became a relationship, and we watched them fall in love. We also see all the lengths that his family takes to try to keep them apart.
Absolutely. Some extraordinary lengths. I was like, what? But again, taking all of that information and wanting to put it into a story that my goal was to move the reader and also have the reader asking similar questions about choices that they were making and who they were or who she was.
Right.
Right,
because there is a choice that she made. And honestly, I feel, as the reader, that initially it wasn't so much that it was a choice that she made, it was the life that she was handed.
Yeah.
The way that she walked through life.
Right.
There does come a point where she has to make a choice. We're not going to talk about that because you have to read it. But there does come a point where she has to make a choice. But initially, she's just going along with what she was told.
Yeah.
And, I just found that interesting as well, because there's this thing of, are you going to be the person that someone is telling you that you should be? Are you going to show up in the world the way that someone tells you should show up in the world? Or are you going to make your own choices? She had a older sister who made a different choice.
Exactly. But also, her sister's choices versus hers, she couldn't imagine that for a long time, making that kind of decision for herself. Not unusual for a young woman in the 1920s.
Right.
Society didn't have that option available to
Right.
women, regardless of skin color.
Right.
Options were limited.
Mhm.
And there was always a struggle to step outside of the norm.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it's that's part of the fun of writing historical fiction, researching historical fiction, is to pay heed to what was
Right.
and what is
Yeah.
today, because you almost put a magnify or a spotlight on today's discrepancies and opportunities that have
Mhm.
changed by showcasing women who fought against
Right.
the norm for that time period in which they lived.
Well, I also want to talk about, because we mentioned Roberta, and we'll get to her in a little bit. I want to talk about Marvel because we have not talked about her yet. Marvel,
Yeah,
of course, Alice is the main character, but she has these interactions with her niece Roberta, and also with Marvel, who is a journalist. But
right.
just seeing how she worked for the big black newspaper at the time, and
News.
how, as a woman who wanted to be a journalist in the 1920s, some of what she had to do and how she.
Absolutely. And it carried through to the 1940s a little bit. But let me make the point that Marvel Cunningham is a fictional character.
Mhm.
But Marvel Cunningham was inspired by a real reporter from that time period named Marvel Cook.
Yes.
Marvel Cook was an amazing trailblazer and she did work at the Amsterdam News. She did work for W.E.B. Du Bois and wrote for The Crisis. She
Mhm.
did end up working in television later on, I believe, in Washington, D.C. later in her life. So she
Right.
became a very active um, pioneering reporter and civil rights activist.
Mhm.
But I loved her name, Marvel.
Yes.
So I said, I'm going to hang on to that and sort of come up with this character named Marvel Cunningham who represents Marvel Cook and several other women,
Right.
women of color, Black women of that time period who were striving to be a part of the news biz, because it wasn't that, not only weren't there jobs available at white newspapers, Black newspapers weren't hiring women to do that type of work. So I definitely was excited to put Marvel in the story and use her as an antagonist not in the meaning of villain, but
Right.
someone who influences your main character and might have some ideas that the main character would not necessarily follow. And my goal with Marvel was to have her over time put some thoughts and ideas into um, Alice's head. So
Right. Mhm.
she, she sort of caught on to what she needed to do,
Mhm.
even though there was again complications.
Yes, there were definitely complications, but what I loved about Marvel, and I could not have this conversation and not bring her up just because
Right?
she is a pivotal character. But I also like the fact that, she looked like a lot of us women today. It's like, I have
Yes.
a career that I'm working towards. I am looking to move up the ladder in my career. I live in a nice home. I'm able to do nice things, but
Yep.
she still had love in her life
Yes.
and all of that. So I loved seeing that. She wasn't a person that we think, 1920s, 30s, 40s. We think that time frame. We don't think of women in that way, of any color, as you've already said, especially as Black women, because we know we've always worked. I mean, we had no choice but to work.
Always had.
But, you know, to be able to have this level of independence, so to speak.
Mhm.
She had
Yeah, and she did. And I wrote her that way. And I did the research to know that she would have had that opportunity. I mean, there are some books coming um, down the pipe from some authors that are going to definitely show you 1920s Harlem and what Black men and women who were getting things done and had some money in their pockets and
Mhm.
how they were living and what they were dealing with. Many of them civil rights activists, but many of them living their lives during a very progressive time because looking at it was still pre-civil rights movement, but it was in the midst of W.E.B. Du Bois's activities and his organization, NAACP,
Right.
etc. Early days of these organizations that were very impactful work nationwide change.
Mhm.
So yeah, I really um, I liked Marvel. I wanted her in
Yeah.
that book. I needed her in that story.
Yes. And I like you also pay homage to some other great Black women writers of the time because you do mention Zora Neale Hurston. She's
Yeah,
mentioned. You mentioned Nella Larson,
yeah,
who
yes.
wrote Passing.
Because in passing, she mentions the Rhinelander tribe
Hmm.
because it was happening during the time she was writing that. And Zora Neale Hurston arrived in New York uh, a year before, because the scene, I think, I'm trying to remember these books. The scene that she's in is when she just arrived in the city about a year before. So she was still living in New York, still interacting with certain people in those early days.
Hmm.
So and I always enjoy dropping in some historical figures
I
that will
love it.
be recognizable names for
Mhm.
many readers. It doesn't have
Mhm.
to be for all, but for many. Because the other thing I'm finding with the stories that I've written, there's and I think it happens with many historical fiction novels where people read and then they go to the internet and
Right.
start researching.
Right.
And then they're sitting there going, "Yay, this is true."
Right, right. It definitely would make you do
Yeah,
that because immediately when you mention Nella Larson, like, oh, I know who that is. You know,
right,
just certain things I automatically
yeah.
knew who the people were that you were talking about. And of course, there's a little bit of Harlem Renaissance in there. There's a
Mhm.
little bit of, you know, them being in Harlem and going to the jazz clubs and things like that. They call them juice joints. So is that correct?
Yeah. Point. And that phrase, because I think I had a conversation with a copy editor about that phrase because they couldn't find it, but it's specifically in the Black community, especially in the late 20s. I think I mentioned it in the late 20s, early 30s. But then it becomes more prevalent a term as swing and
Mhm.
comes into style and what else? Lindy Hop
Right.
and all of that. And that's more towards the mid 30s or
Mhm.
early 30s to the mid. I'm working on a book where those things,
Okay. Well,
where those dance forms, people go to the clubs
oh, we'll be ready for that when you know that.
oh
Yeah,
yeah,
it was that, and then also was it black and tans, like the
oh
club
yeah,
where
that
people
was
would basically be black and white people in these
yeah,
clubs in New
yeah.
York.
And different forms of the black and tan because the black and tan I wrote about black and tans in the Wild Women in the Blues, for example, and they would have certain sections
Mm,
roped off. Everybody could be in the same club, but you didn't necessarily get to mingle. Other clubs you got to mingle.
mhm.
It was all according. I think in I can't remember the name of the nightclub in Dreamland Cafe was
Okay.
Wild Women in the Blues. And the book I'm working on now is the Savoy Ballroom.
Oh
Now,
yeah.
the Savoy Ballroom, there was a huge Savoy Ballroom in New York, but there
Mm-hmm.
was also one in Chicago that
Got
was
it.
just as popular, in near the Regal Theater, over on South Side, South Shore. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah, that's home. That's hometown then for you.
Yeah, yeah. I was like, I used to go over there.
Wow, wow. I love that. But yes, I love being able to see all these things happening within the stories. I mean, that's the thing of getting outside of just facts and really giving, characters, like where would they have gone? What would they have been eating? I know there were a couple.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
saw some things and I was like, was it double bubble or something like that? Gum existed back then, just
Right.
different things.
It had a different name, but I had to research that because
Right.
those that and the fact that the one you know, thinking about a cook, a woman, Alice's mother was a cook at a big house in
Mm,
England. That's where she met her husband. And so what was the cuisine
mhm.
in 1890s? Now, not that I spent hours and hours and hours researching cuisine, but I spent some time because I wanted to throw in, well, I don't have a clear understanding of the mince of the meat pies.
It doesn't
I
sound
don't know.
good.
But I just wanted to have that sort of texture in there. So I definitely looked that up.
We could see that. And then also invoke a little bit of her culture, because I mean, the reality of it is, yes, there is
Mhm.
this father who may be considered mulatto, but mother is, English
She's
and
Brit.
understand British, and,
Yeah,
understanding that there are different cultures. And
he's Brit too because I don't think Jamaica got its independence until mid or later in the 20th century. I'm not,
mhm,
I'm getting all of my
yeah,
Caribbean
it's a lot.
because my family is Jamaican and Bermudan, and
Okay.
Bermuda is still a province or whatever of Britain, and
Mhm,
Jamaica is independent, except of course
mhm.
money that they're owed. But no,
Mhm.
but yeah, that all of uh, those different cultures that are blended.
Mhm.
And I wanted to touch upon that. Even though the most mysterious character or person in all of this is I think, of Alice's father.
Yes.
Alice's
Yeah.
father, um, and I don't. This is not a spoiler. I'm not sure I put it in the book, but I might have. I don't think I did. He was caught outside by reporters, and um, I say caught because of course, he was just trying to get to work or whatever, and
Mhm.
he got very angry. And they have these photos of him being, angry, like
Mhm.
dangerously angry. And I was like, this man had to hold a lot in.
Right.
A lot in because his girls were under attack, uh,
Yeah.
and so and he was a family man. He was
Yeah.
a family man, you know.
Yes. But that is really, because of course the whole thing of it being a trial of Mrs. Rhinelander. And because we don't get spoilers, we're not telling all of it, but just
Right.
understanding
Well,
that,
I'll tell you about the title though. The
yeah.
title, I think a way that we talked about it with the editorial team, because it was their idea. I had a different title for the book.
Okay.
But she's on trial not necessarily just in the case of a court trial,
Right.
public opinion, her
Mhm.
family's opinion, her friends' opinion. Her life was on trial on so many different levels. And
Mhm.
and so what did that do to her? And that 20-year difference by going into Roberta in 1940s and the conflict that existed in the family still that
Mhm.
still hurt. her, a young woman who was quite comfortable and brown
Mm-hmm.
being a Black woman.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And to have this as a part of her legacy, she had some moments.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, it was definitely tough, like for Roberta, and being in a position of having to talk to this person that she feels, was disruptive in her own family life and all of that, but then kind of getting angry, having moments with her, but then also being able to take a step back and really listen.
Yeah,
Because I think sometimes that's the problem. We can be in our feelings, so to speak, about a situation, and then we don't really hear or listen to what the other person is saying. But even with Roberta, we see her, making transitions and trying to figure out what her career path is going to be and what she wants to do, similar to Marvel being in
mhm.
being in the same journalistic space, and how 20 years after Marvel, she's going through some of the same challenges and figuring out how she's going to show up as well.
Yeah, yeah. So it was it took me a while to find her Roberta's character.
Okay.
Um, but Roberta was named after her dad. Um, and I did find something in the facts that I didn't use because I had a character in another book by the same name. But um, Alice called her Bessie,
Okay.
and I didn't want to use that name because I have a character in my first book, Wild Women in the Blues. Her name is Bessie, and
Mhm.
that character is you know a character people remember if they've read
Right.
the book.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Right.
she's a mess. Oh, yeah.
Yes, but it's just good to see that, just to understand, even from her perspective in the 40s, what was
Mhm.
happening with her, how she was navigating the world, and even the fact that can be things that happen in families, because it's a family story
Yeah.
as well as, the love story and all the things that happen between Alice and Lenny, but
Mhm.
it's also family, because how do the choices of one person potentially have an impact on the entire family?
And you get a sense of that in the 1940s
Yeah.
timeline with the Rhinelander family.
Yes, that is
'Cause
what.
it's that I found so interesting.
Mhm.
No spoilers, but some people can't let go.
Yeah.
Oh, there was a little bit of that.
Yes, it is hard. And I mean, hey, 2024, a lot of people can't let go. But seeing that
Mhm.
as well, and it gave me food for thought, just to think about how something can happen in a family, and you might be a kid when it happens, but because you've heard certain things, that people have said certain things, you can develop a mindset about a situation or a person, and you're carrying basically somebody else's baggage.
Absolutely, and part of that storyline came to me because of my late uncle's first wife, and I only knew her for a couple of years when I was maybe 6 years old, and
Mhm.
I remember her vividly. And her name was Henrietta, and she was something else. That's all I can say. I
Mhm.
mean, I remember what she looked like back then.
Mhm.
Or she very different from my island family. She wore bright red lipstick and had
Mhm.
long red nails, and she was just someone bigger than life.
Mm.
Okay. And so people can impress young people in ways that, because they say your memory, you can really go back in memory
Mhm.
3 or 4, um,
Mhm.
because memory starts to kick in at age 2.
Mhm.
But I also, years ago, I would travel to a memory class
Hmm.
by a memorist, how to draw your memories to write a memoir,
Ooh.
the processes that you can go through. So from those classes, because I haven't written a memoir, of course, but using that some of those techniques
Mm.
to draw from my past and sort of see if any of that can be attributed or used to create character on the page.
I like that. We have to talk about that offline because yes, because I think the earliest memory that I personally have is I can remember being in my crib in the house that we lived in at the time, and like my parents had, back then everything pink and blue,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
whatever the case. And I remember they had like these things on the wall that were like, might have been an elephant and a giraffe or whatever it was, that was a picture. And I can remember sitting in my crib, waking up in the morning and looking up and looking at those pictures. I remember that. And like I was still in a crib at the time.
Yeah.
So I would love to. I know sometimes people don't want to because they're afraid of what they might find.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
But I like that idea of just being
to really use memory and be comfortable searching memory. I'll tell you all about the class. It was taught by Rebecca Walker, who is Alice Walker.
I know that is. Yep.
She still teaches that class. She teaches it in Hawaii, in Maui.
Okay. So yeah, Rebecca Walker, who is Alice Walker's daughter.
Yeah. It's a lovely class.
We need to look into that because I often will tell people the very first book that I really remembering as an adult written by a Black woman is Alice Walker's The Color Purple. So I have a thing for Alice Walker.
Yeah, you'll remember that one. But her daughter has written several memoirs, and she's a fabulous teacher and was a very notable feminist and continues to be so, coming out of Yale back in the 80s, I believe, late 70s, no, 80s, early 90s. Mm-hmm.
So we're almost at time. Can you believe that? But the child, yes, it goes by so fast.
Yes.
Mrs. Rhinelander is out in the world for everybody tomorrow. And Rhonda said that she has already ordered the audio, so she's going to be listening to it.
Oh, good. Yay. Thank you, Rhonda.
And I really do suggest that folks, grab a copy, get the audio, whatever the case may be, because
the audio is getting a lot of attention.
That's good. That's good.
Read some things. People love it. I really, I get to select from up to 6 different narrators, and the woman does a brilliant job. She does a brilliant job. They picked the one that I said I wanted.
That's good.
And so it's really, she's really good. Really good.
Yes, I love that. And I really suggest that people read it because we've already talked about, we didn't give away anything that's going to spoil it for you. You have to read it because I'm telling y'all, I told y'all I was like, I had a doctor's appointment today. I'm like, y'all called me too quick. I was trying to read about 10 pages, 15 pages while I'm sitting here waiting. Before but I really enjoyed it, the love story of it. Watching, the evolution of Alice, seeing her go through her ups and downs, watching her make hard choices, the things that were happening within her family, all of that. Marvel, Roberta, all of it. I just really enjoyed it. I think it's a very powerful story that speaks to women of the time. But then there are also lessons that we can glean for where we are in this time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially there's one thing that I was thinking about in thinking about our times today, because you talk about mixed race marriages and children, biracial, or, and it's according to sometimes it's about who raises you, what
Mhm.
your perspective on race is within the home. And then you step out in the world and you
Mhm.
may learn something different.
Mhm.
So there is that comparison. And I wanted to be sensitive to that because I feel that um, it your parentage and being biracial or not or whatever shouldn't be another burden on
Right.
on people, but
Right.
sometimes it can be.
Sometimes it can be. People feel like they have to make a choice, or, in this case, at least in certain stages of Alice's life, the choice was made for her. So you had to do
Absolutely.
something. And I have to mention it right quick. I said that wait till after we were done. We're almost done. But I
Okay.
want to mention this book is called One Drop because one drop does come up in this story. I don't
Yes.
know if you've had a chance to see this book, everybody. I would suggest it. It is One Drop by Dr. Yaba Blay, and it actually has stories of course, I would turn to a page that doesn't necessarily have a picture, but Soledad O'Brien is one of the people in here.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it talks about a lot of different people, some known, some maybe not as known, that are saying where they land in the space of
Exactly.
have
And
had
that's
one drop.
some of what Rebecca Walker's memoirs talks about as well, because her father was Jewish, or is
Hmm.
Jewish. And you brought up Soledad. I worked with Soledad many years ago,
Hmm.
and she was very interesting, very powerful woman.
Hmm.
Um, definitely. Um,
Right, but like this gentleman here. Now,
yeah,
of course, we look at him and we see those features, and we're like,
right,
yeah.
right.
So
Exactly.
it's just, but I just think that this is a good book for anybody who wants to know more about that, or maybe if it's something that is a part of their own life or someone in their
Mhm.
family that you just want to learn more. I would definitely suggest One Drop by Dr. Yaba Blay.
Absolutely.
And in terms of the trial of Mrs. Rhinelander, please go and get your copies. If you haven't already pre-ordered, it's not too late. I know I had to order an extra one because mine got a little damp, and I spilled some water accidentally, so I want one that's pristine for my library. But they are available at the Brown Girl Collective Bookstore, which is just that, Brown Girl Collective Bookstore, that is a part of Bookshop. And I actually have reopened my Amazon store, which
Oh,
is BGC Books and More, because there's other stuff besides just books. So if you'd like to find copies there, please feel free to do that. This supports the work that we do here. So Denny,
yeah.
what's going on with you tomorrow and then the days ahead? Places where people
Well,
maybe can find you, or
tomorrow I'm gonna pay attention to some of my local bookstores.
okay.
I'm I have a conversation I'm having tomorrow night uh, uh, that I'm looking forward to, really looking forward to. And then after that, I'm on deadline for another book
Wow.
before I travel to Atlanta the first week in August,
I see.
going to weekend, just the weekend. I'm going to the National Book Club conference.
Okay.
They're celebrating their 30th or 35th anniversary, so
Yeah.
definitely looking forward to that event.
And I didn't get
Um,
my ticket in time. Matter of fact, I met you there last year. Yeah,
yeah,
but I didn't get my ticket in
uh,
time this year.
I'm
So
going to go back. I'm looking forward to it. They're having a big to do. They have a lot of authors coming out there. Um,
mhm.
and then but then, as I said, I have another book to write after I finish the one I'm working on. And this fall, I am all over the place a little bit. Going
Okay.
to be at the Writers Digest conference, at the WFWA retreat, and teaching in Jacksonville to Sisters in Crime, blah, blah, blah.
Well, yeah,
So
you got a lot going on.
it's a little hectic. I'm very excited about everything I'm doing. Very excited.
Yes. Well, everyone, you can see at the bottom how you can keep up with this lady.
Oh, my newsletter. When you go to my website, sign up for my newsletter. That's my new push for. I have a new, what do they call it? A word that I'm focused on for 2025. I'm starting early, and it's
Okay.
discipline.
Okay.
And the subset of discipline is gathering more people to my newsletter so I can talk to them more and more about what's going on, and creating that special club of readers that I want to share maybe some of those missing scenes and stuff like
Oh
that.
yeah, that would be good. And for
Yeah.
everyone, when you read or listen to this book or any other of Denny's books, please, leave good reviews, tell people about it, spread the word, because all of that makes a difference. I was
Yes, it
explaining
does.
to a family member the other day, who has written in the past, and they're like, "Oh, I want to get into, I want to do da 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 da." I'm like, "Well, you got to start building your community now, because that's what it looks like nowadays."
Yeah.
So, if you're building community and all of that,
Work. And the publishers are there doing what they do, but you want to grow
mm,
and keep writing. So that means more readers.
absolutely, absolutely. So, thank you so much for your time. I'm going to let you grab some water as I announce next week's book. So, Winnie, thank you again. I appreciate you.
Thank
Please don't
you.
hang up just yet, but thank you for
Okay.
being here. Thank you to everyone who's in the room, those who left comments and those who did not. We got quite a few people in the room. So please,
Yeah.
I hope that you will share this out, as well as go and pick up copies of the books and follow Denny in all of the different places that you can. Get on that newsletter, all the good goods, so that you can keep up with her. And you know that the next time another book comes out, she's going to be here. You know that. That's a given. But, all the other things that she has going on, especially things that might be local to your area. So I will see you in just a second. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right. I love Denny. As I said, I met her last year at the event that she was talking about, and she's been here a couple of times. I believe this is the third time. So I'm looking forward to having her here every time she comes out with another glorious book, as The Trial of Mrs. Rhinelander is. So, as I said, please go out and grab copies and share it with friends, do your book clubs, all those sorts of things. Let Denny know how you feel about her and her work. So next week, I'm excited. We're going to have Grown Women by Sarah Johnson. She'll be here next week for us to talk about grown women. So be on the lookout for that. Same time, same place, next Monday at 8:00 p.m. Eastern. So be on the lookout for that. And in the meantime, in between time, please take good care of yourselves. And I look forward to seeing you again real, real soon. Thanks for being here. Bye-bye.